Sam Dolnick with the New York Times joins us now. Sam, thanks for a little bit of your time and for your reporting on this story.
Hi, happy to be here.
Want to start with some of what you've reported going on inside these halfway houses. You've got stories of murders, robberies, drugs, gang violence, sexual assaults, escapees then committing other violent crimes. I'm just wondering, what individual stories stuck with you through your 10-month investigation, either for the nature of what happened or just the surprise that it was happening inside state-sanctioned halfway houses?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in this world, and it's a grim one. Talking to people who have been traumatized and attacked, and it's been difficult. The story that sticks with me the most, I think, is the story of Derek West Harris, who went into one of these halfway houses because he had unpaid traffic tickets, and he was killed 2 days later in a robbery inside his room.
You know, one of the items from your reports that struck with me and really struck to the heart of the conditions inside these halfway houses, you have prisoners who you said would tell people they'd rather be back in prison than be in the halfway house. You also have employees or former employees of these halfway houses who used to be corrections officers who have quit because they were appalled by the conditions inside.
Yeah, these places are as large as prisons often, but they have very little of the security. So you've got one, maybe two guards on duty at a time. They're paid $11 an hour. They've received very little training, and they're responsible for 150, 170 inmates. And remember, these inmates are not in cells. There's not locks. There's not bars. They're free to roam if they like. And it's a scary situation, both for the inmates and for the guards.
What was your reaction when you realized both the people who were being held at these halfway houses and the people who were supposed to be watching them are all scared to be where they are?
I mean, I think it's an example of how troubled this system has become. It's started, about 2 decades ago with the best of intentions to help prisoners re-enter society. This is a population that gets very little help. But over the past 20 years, 10, 15 years, it's changed into something much larger. We called it in the paper a shadow correction system, and I think that holds up.
You've got inmates being held in group rooms, basically, with open access to walk around and go from room to room during night times. You reported the gangs control payphones and a lot of activity, including running some of the rehab clinics or the rehab sessions inside some of these places. 73% testing positive for drugs in one test. Low-level inmates kept with murderers and other violent offenders. Broken security cameras. And then also, interestingly, a comptroller report last year said, hey, you know what? There are all these security problems within these halfway houses. Do you know what, if any, actions the state took after their own comptroller said or indicated how big the problems were?
Yeah, the comptroller's audit last year was fascinating and scathing in a lot of ways. And the Department of Corrections issued a response to it, said they were aware of a lot of the problems, and they promised to fix them. They said they would crack down on escapes. They said they would commission a study to find out if the halfway houses help people. They've never, for all the money they've spent on them, the state has never looked at whether they've in fact cut down on recidivism rates. Still, even after the report, hundreds more people escaped last year from halfway houses.
And that's within the state institutions. What kind of questioning did company officials get as a result of these kinds of reports?
From the comptroller's report, you mean?
Yeah.
Company officials didn't have to respond officially to the report. It was a response for the corrections department to deal with. I interviewed company officials who felt that the audit highlighted some serious issues, and they promised that they would try to improve, and they said that they have already improved. But the comptroller really saw it as a problem of state oversight, that the state needed to better regulate these private operators.
Now, the state has fined the company. In one of your reports, you said $15,000, I think, this past April. The state's contracts with with CEC are $71 million. Do I have that number right? $71 million state contract, $15,000 fine?
Yeah, last year they earned $71 million, and that's in a number of contracts. They contract with the Corrections Department, with the Parole Department, with county agencies. That all adds up to $71 million. And as far as the fines, the Department of Corrections can fine each halfway house operator $5,000 per escape. They've never done that before. This year, for the first time ever, in April, they issued fines for 6 escapes against 3 halfway house operators. Community Education was one of them. They were fined for 3 escapes.
I was trying to do the math on what a $15,000 fine is as a percentage of their $71 million contract. I can't do numbers quite that small. You mentioned the walkouts as being one of the more significant problems. You certainly highlighted throughout the 3 pieces. 5,100 walk-offs in total from halfway houses since 2005, another 1,300 since Christie took over in 2010. 163 walk-offs in a 4-month period and 85 still at large. Is the company or are the other halfway houses doing anything in particular to try to cut down on the walkouts?
They say they are. It's the halfway houses, remember, they are staffed by low-wage workers who are not allowed to restrain anyone from leaving. So they don't. So they say in a lot of ways their hands are tied. So what they do is try to offer better treatment. They offer counseling and to encourage people to stay, but they can't physically keep them there. And then they have said that they are improving some security measures as far as, leaving doors open, leaving gates open, that kind of thing. So they say they are trying to do better.
Any indication from CEC or from any of the others that they're going to try to improve the quality of their workforce? I mean, you said, first of all, the numbers, there are 1 or 2 workers for 170 inmates. They get 8 days of training, whereas corrections officers get 15 weeks of training. You said they're paid a little more than minimum wage, and some of them have backgrounds working the register at convenience stores. Any chance that you're reporting or any indication that you're reporting might lead to more and a better caliber of employees at these places?
Community Education stands by its employees. It says that they comply with state law as far as the level of training that their employees receive. They say that the ratio that you cited, 1 to 150, 170, they say that has given them no problems. They've had no reports of unsafe conditions or attacks, assaults, anything like that. So they've told me that they are entirely comfortable with their staffing. They say, sure, every organization has bad apples, and we try to sort them out, but they've given no indication of changing their model.
You also mentioned in one of the pieces evidence from a murder and a murder trial that I think happened in the Essex facility that you cited, but the murder trial in January of last year, where pretty much everything was laid on the table in terms of the inmates' ability to move around, their ability to fashion weapons, organize in gang actions, and lead to a guy who was murdered for what they thought was $20. It was actually $3. With all that stuff laid out on the table, it's now been a year and a half. Did the company indicate any changes as a result of that evidence that came out in a murder trial?
No, they didn't. Company officials said they didn't attend the trial and felt they had no obligation to attend the trial. The Department of Corrections said there were no changes made in Delaney Hall after the murder. The company and the county said they conducted investigations and found that there was no wrongdoing beyond the 3 inmates who were prosecuted.
So even though they were able to sort of have the control of the place or the run of the place to commit this murder, there weren't any questions about the company or the setup that gave them free run of the place to commit the murder.
I think there are very serious questions, but the authorities and the company say that they've asked them and they can't be held responsible.
One of the big takeaways from all of the reporting that you did in the 10-month investigation, at least for me, was a sense that there's really no incentive from the players involved in all of this to change the system. One of the reasons for that is that there is a ton of money involved in all this. $130 million contract for CEC from Essex County, another $71 million from the state. And the counties or the state can make money from this process also. They certainly save money that they would be spending on incarcerating their own prisoners, correct?
Yeah, and that's, I think how the system evolved into what it is. It's a very appealing pitch that these companies have for the state. They say, we'll house your inmates for half of what it costs you, and we'll do a better job. We'll rehabilitate them. We'll give them substance abuse treatment so that when they're released, they won't return to crime. That's a hard pitch to resist for officials facing budget crunches.
And in Essex County, at least, from your reporting, they're able to profit from this because they move their inmates into the halfway houses, save about 50% on save 50 cents on the dollar, and that opens up the prison space for them to then bring in federal inmates that they can charge the federal government full price for, correct?
Right. Essex County has found its county jail, it's a large facility, over 2,000 beds, to be a tremendous source of revenue for the county. And that's by renting its space to federal authorities to hold immigrant detainees and federal inmates. The federal government pays for that, about $110, $105 a day per bed. And the halfway houses are about half the price of that. So yeah, Essex County sends inmates to Delaney Hall and then houses immigrants and federal inmates at the county jail, and that has added up to tens of millions of dollars in revenue.
And on top of that, the politicians get to say, well, we're saving all this money, we have fewer inmates in our prisons or in our system, and we're able to take a dent in our deficits and actually make some money in the case of Essex County. So where in this system is the impetus to try to fix things or actually look after the inmates?
Well, as you say, the system has been championed by county and state officials, even all the way up to the White House. People have been saying this is a model for the rest of the country. And since the reports have come out, there has been some calls for a closer look, closer scrutiny. The Christie administration said they were going to step up inspections to try to determine what services are being delivered inside. They said they've already cracked down on the number of escapes. And state legislators have said that they're going to plan hearings and conduct inquiries and try to determine for themselves what happens inside as well.
The Christie administration also launching a 3-year investigation into all of this. I'm just trying to do the math from your reporting. There could be as many as 30.
Well, can I stop? Sorry, it's a 3-year study that they've commissioned last year, and that's to assess how these programs work. So no one has ever studied whether the halfway houses cut down on recidivism. So that's a study to find out if these programs keep people away from crime, and that will take 3 to 4 years.
So even though
it's not meant to look at the conditions inside necessarily.
Understood, but even though that's one of the sales pitch that companies like CEC give to a county like Essex County or the state government of New Jersey, that it's going to lower recidivism, nobody can prove that? That's what you're saying?
The state has never looked at that independently. CEC has commissioned a number of studies that show that its programs work and lower recidivism. But those are studies that the company has paid for. The state has never conducted an independent look.
And it would seem to me that the company would have every incentive, financial and otherwise, to try to make their setup sound as good, as safe, and as effective as possible.
The company stands by its mission and its strategy and says that it offers really effective services at half the rate of what the government can deliver.
Then there were the political incentives in this process. We touched on the savings that political leaders can use on their budgets. You also highlight some of the political connections between this company in particular, CEC, and some of the key players in all of this, including Governor Christie, who not only is friends with the senior vice president, William Palatucci. They were partners together. They were he was an advisor. He's a friend. Palatucci also gave Chris Christie's name to Karl Rove. Is that correct? And catapulted, or at least helped catapult Chris Christie in his career?
Yeah, they've been friends going back years and years, decades. And they were both major fundraisers for President Bush. And after Bush won the election, Mr. Palatucci recommended to the White House that Chris Christie be named U.S. Attorney. So yeah, they've certainly been linked together for many years.
You also spotlight a wedding where the daughter of the CEO of Community Education Centers was getting married. Her husband, by the way, works for Chris Christie. You mentioned Christie, Dick Cody, the former governor, and the Essex County executive, a Democrat, all there at that wedding. And by the way, also got about $200,000 total, either their campaigns or their parties, from the company, correct?
Yeah, that's right. John Clancy, the CEO of the company, has been a major political contributor across the aisle for years. He's knows politicians, Republican Party, Democratic Party, and so that wedding was an example of just how well connected he is.
Any of the political leaders that you speak to about this say that there might be, a conflict of interests given the connections between the company and these political leaders?
The legislators, as we said, there's some Democrats in the legislature who say that they're going to look into it. But the Christie's office has, maintained adamantly that there's been no special favoritism to this company. And it should be said that the halfway house system well precedes Chris Christie in the State House. The system was set up years ago. Certainly, but it has expanded in the last couple of years under the Christie administration, has it not? Well, but there's different ways to measure it. The number of beds that CEC has actually gone down since Corzine was in the State House, but the revenue that the company has gotten from Department of Corrections has gone up. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. Fair enough. You also reached out to some lawmakers, some legislators to get their take on all of this. Did most of them have any idea that these accusations or that these issues existed within the halfway house system? No, they really didn't. I think, as we were saying before, the halfway house system, it's appealing for government, and on both sides of the aisle. Republicans like it because it saves money. Democrats like it because it gives offenders a second chance. And none of them, I got the sense, had really taken a hard look at what's being delivered here. So no, they didn't, the escape numbers, legislators had no idea. They've never looked at it. Many of them said that halfway house issues just was not on their radar screen. We've mentioned a few other spots where this sort of thing might have gotten a little more scrutiny, from the comptroller's report or from the murder trial that sprung out of that case in the Essex County facility. There was also a deputy corrections commissioner, Lydell Scherer, who was convicted of extortion in connection to some of the setups of these halfway houses, at least in terms of getting people jobs. Can you explain that a little bit more? Yeah, he was pleaded guilty to extortion charges. There had been a kind of sting operation set up that found him promising to arrange jobs to ex-employees at private operators. Those private operators were halfway houses in New Jersey, including some of a big facility run by Community Education, among others. Did the state or any other body begin any investigating or ask any questions as a result of that incident about the setup? No, as far as I know, the Scherer case began and ended with him. All right, as you probably aware, Bill Palatucci appeared on New Jersey Television Network the other day and had some pretty scathing criticisms of the reporting, and I just wanted to get whatever take you could give me in response. He claimed that you got the story wrong, sensationalizing a field that you didn't agree with or didn't like, and he called the piece a front-page editorial. Can you respond to those criticisms at all? Well, I don't want to get into a back and forth, but we certainly have no interest in judging the policy or on one way or another. It was the editorial board had zero to do with this story, of course, as you know. We were looking at a system and its oversight and its accountability, and what we found was pretty troubling. He's questioned the number, the 5,100 escapees, saying that they're mostly parolees, they're not breaking out of the halfway houses. Is there validity in that critique, or do your numbers just show something different? Well, our numbers come from the state. They are, we did multiple open records requests and got the state data. About half of that 5,100 who escaped are state inmates who are assigned to finish out their sentence in a halfway house, and half are parolees who are, under the terms of their parole, assigned to a halfway house. Whether you're an inmate or a parolee, if you flee the custody, you're committing a crime, and you face charges of up to 3 to 5 years.
So even if it's maybe not 5,100 walking away from these halfway houses, you're saying it would be about half that number, which still I think might raise a few eyebrows.
No. I mean, we certainly stand by our number. 5,100 people have fled the custody of halfway houses. Now, some of them, Mr. Palatucci made a point that they're not tunneling out under the walls, and that's largely true. I mean, some of them are climbing over fences and sneaking through windows and through doors, but a huge number of them are on work release. They're out in the community, and then they don't return to the halfway house. That still counts as an escape under the law, and so we presented it as such.
And that you still have violent offenders who are just able to walk away is another thing that boggles my mind. Just one more thing I wanted to double check. Palatucci said about the claims of sex assaults and gang activity not true. Said immense amount of accountability and supervision, including random drug tests, surprise inspections, and even drug dogs. Your reporting indicated quite the opposite. Lots of gang activity, not very much accountability, not very much supervision. In fact, some employees of these halfway houses being tipped off when these surprise inspections were coming. I'm curious your reaction to his trying to walk back that element of your reporting.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear him say that. Dr. Mackey, Robert Mackey, who's a senior vice president at the company, in an interview with us that we quoted in the newspaper, acknowledged that these sexual assaults happened. One of the sexual assaults is pending trial at the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office right now, and the other charges weren't presented, but Dr. Mackey acknowledged that he was aware that it had happened as well. As far as the drug tests, Mercer County, again, the Mercer County test found that 73% of its inmates at the CEC Center had tested positive for drugs, so we certainly feel that these problems are serious and real.
This is one area of privatization, which is a fairly broad term, as you know, for taking government services and putting them in the hands of private companies. There are a host, any number of other areas that particularly Governor Christie is seeking to privatize. And this may be outside, this is certainly outside the scope of your reporting, but I'm wondering if you're curious about similar possibilities happening in other privatized areas where you have financial incentives for the politicians and for the private businesses to basically make it work, regardless of, let's say, the quality or in this case, the security or the safety.
Yeah, that's really not for me to say. I mean, we're looking at this system and the accountability and the oversight, and as far as what could be extrapolated into other industries, I'll leave that to others.
All right, fair enough. Well, I think we're gonna just about leave it there, although I'd be loath if I didn't ask Sam if there's any other highlights from the reporting that you wanted to spotlight or anything else that you wanted to talk about.
No, I'm impressed. You really read the stories well. You covered it.
Well, it kind of blew me away because the significance of the problems inside these facilities and the fact that it seemed like nobody either knew about it or had an incentive to fix it. It just, to me, it was pretty surprising. It sounds like it surprised you a great deal as well.
Yeah. Constantly reporting, we would just be shocked to learn of, I'd be speaking with someone and they'd tell me a story about how drugs enter the facility. One of their big facilities is right next to a highway, and people would stand on the shoulder of the road and they'd cut open tennis balls and fill them with drugs and then throw them over the fence because the fence is that close to the highway. So those kinds of details about how the dysfunction actually happens day to day were continuously shocking to me.
And yet everybody in a position of responsibility or authority seems to say, hey, there's nothing wrong here, everything's working the way it's supposed to.
Well, they've said that so far, but it's early days. Our story just published yesterday, and we've gotten a flood of information in the days since. So I expect that there will be more to come.
Last question, Sam. Governor Christie's response is that he wants to try to look at this a little bit better, maybe throw a little bit more personnel in. Does it sound like it's beginning to get the ball rolling, like there may be changes or maybe at least some help for the people who are in these halfway houses?
It's possible. It's certainly, I think, encouraging that the governor said he wants to step up inspections. The Department of Corrections says that they've already stepped up inspections. They said they've conducted hundreds of announced and unannounced site visits in the last year, and the Commissioner of Corrections said that he's the first commissioner ever to have visited every halfway house in the system. So they say that they are taking this seriously and they're on top of it. So we'll see.
Well, it's always a compliment when politicians say, hey, this is a political attack, because they can't seem to counter the facts. But some terrific reporting on this series, and I would advise everybody watching us tonight to read the 3 parts. Sam Dolnick, reporter from the New York Times, and his 10-month investigation into these halfway houses. Sam, thanks very much for the time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.